The forest kept her secret until the moon began to cry. Snow fell like shards of broken glass, whispering across the bones of the old Dominion forest. Every flake carried a memory, one of fire, betrayal, and vows unkept. Beneath the skeletal birches moved a figure half swallowed by the storm. Her hair was a black river tangled with frost, her breath trembling in the pale air. Era collapsed against a crooked pine, one arm locked around her swollen belly. Her heartbeat stuttered like a dying drum. The cold bit through her furs and into her skin, yet it wasn't the chill that frightened her. It was silence. Too much silence. No wolves, no hunters. Only the sound of her own blood moving like a whisper beneath the snow. She had been running for 7 nights. Running from the scent of her own curse and from the decree of a council that demanded her death. She, once the healer of Moonreach, had been stripped of her mark for committing the unthinkable, carrying a child no one could claim. When the first contraction tore through her, she bit down on the inside of her cheek until iron filled her mouth. She could not die here. Not yet. Because within her, something older than the law of wolves was stirring, a child who kicked against despair with defiant fury. But destiny is cruel in the north. A shadow moved between the trees, tall and deliberate. The wolves stopped howling. For a fleeting moment, she thought she saw death approaching, wrapped in smoke and armor. The stranger's scent hit her before his voice did. Musk, pine, and the faintest whip of ash. Alpha. Yet not the arrogant kind born from domination. This scent carried regret, a mournful gravity that pulled her heart tight even in fear. He dismounted from a black horse armored in frost, his cloak open to the snow. His face was drawn, the kind shaped by far too many moons of war. Scars traced his jaw, each one a confession. His name, she would later learn, was Phelan of the Bloodthrone, the last wolf king who betrayed his crown to save a child that never lived. When his eyes met hers, time seemed to fracture. "You're dying," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "Not yet." Her lips split on the words. The child must live. He hesitated only a heartbeat before tearing open his cloak to wrap her body. As he lifted her into his arms, blood spilled hot and dark onto the snow. Era gasped, clutching at the pendant around her neck, a crescent of silver cracked through its center. Phelan's own pendant glimmered faintly beneath his armor, its mirror twin. Something in the air stirred, ancient, electric. "Who gave you that?" he asked, startled. "My mother," Era managed. "She said it belonged to a king once." Phelan's throat closed around a truth he could not speak. The storm thickened. He pressed her against his chest and mounted his horse, holding her as one would cradle the last flame on earth. "Don't sleep," he warned, but her eyelids were already sinking, her lips pale. "Why save me?" she whispered. Phelan did not answer. He tightened his arms around her fragile form and turned toward the ruins hidden beyond the ridge, the same place he had chosen years ago as his penance. The forest swallowed them both, its silence resuming, as though fate herself leaned forward to listen. Snow and moonlight folded behind them. Only his vow remained, heavy as iron beneath his breath. "She'll never suffer again," he swore to no one and to everything. The words were not promise, they were prophecy. Wind howled through the cracks of the ruined keep, dragging whispers of forgotten prayers down the hallways of stone. Faint embers glowed in the hearth, licking at the edges of half-rotten wood. The scent of iron hung in the air, almost masked by smoke. Era woke to the sound of breathing, steady, deep, like the rumble of a distant storm. She tried to move, but pain knifed through her ribs and along her abdomen. A groan slipped from her throat before she could stop it. "You're awake." The Alpha sat in the corner, his massive frame outlined against the dim firelight. His armor was gone, replaced by rough tunic and bandaged arms. His eyes watched her with the wary calm of a man used to expecting attacks, even in silence. "Where am I?" "Safe," he said. "For now." Her hand instinctively went to her belly. Still there, the faint rise, the pulse beneath her palm. Relief flooded her eyes before suspicion chased it away. "What price do you want for saving me?" The Alpha turned to the window slit where moonlight shone faintly through dust. "If you have to ask that, you've lived among the wrong kind of men," he said. Ira struggled to sit up. "I've lived among wolves." He did not argue. The fire crackled, catching on a piece of resin and bursting into gold light. In that glow, she saw more of him, the sharp planes of his face, the scars along his shoulder, the faint runes burned into his skin, a mark that once signaled royal command in the old packs. She remembered stories from her childhood, whispered by elders of a king who wore sorrow like a crown. "You are Phelan," she realized aloud, "the fallen Alpha." His jaw tightened. "Once." Her pulse quickened. "You led the raids on the valley. You burned Moonreach." His hand froze mid-motion, the knife he was sharpening stopping cold. The flicker of the firelight deepened the shadows under his eyes. "And now I live in their ashes," he said softly. She wanted to hate him, to tell him what his soldiers had done to her village, how they had hunted the marked and spared none. But the hate would not come. Instead, she saw exhaustion, a man feeding off guilt the way others fed off fury. He rose, poured water into a wooden cup, and handed it to her. Their fingers brushed. She felt the heat of his skin, strangely comforting, wildly dangerous. "Drink," he said. "You lost too much blood." Era drank because she had no choice. The warmth slid down her throat, awakening something more than body, memory. Her mother's voice returned with it, the last words before exile. The goddess puts her wounded in the path of those meant to remember mercy. While she drank, Phelan began to clean his sword by the fire. The silver edge caught the light, and she saw that it was inscribed with names. Dozens. Some scratched out, some still legible. "The dead," he muttered when he saw her watching. "All of them. My doing." "Then why save me?" He looked up. "Because maybe if I protect one life, it will outweigh 100 I took." She did not answer. Her eyelids grew heavy again, but as she drifted toward sleep, she asked quietly, "If the goddess sees what we are, do you think she sees redemption or pity?" Phelan stared into the fire as if the flames themselves whispered judgment. "I think she sees stories," he murmured, "and decides which ones are worth finishing." When morning came, she woke alone. A trail of melted snow led to the door. The Alpha had gone to hunt, yet something inside her had changed. For the first time since exile, her heart beat without dread. Later, when he returned carrying a deer across his shoulders, she tried to rise and help him prepare it. The scent of blood made her dizzy, the reminder of life taking life. Phelan noticed and caught her before she fell. "You should not stand." "I cannot stay lying," she whispered stubbornly. His hand, large and calloused, steadied her shoulder. "You were left to die in that forest," he said. "What were you running from?" Era's gaze drifted to the shutter, where snow pressed against the wood like ghosts waiting their turn. "Not what?" she said softly. "Who?" A long silence stretched between them. "She branded me," she continued, "the high seer of my pack. She said every breath I take would feed the curse. The child is not mortal," she said. "It carries the mark of those who defied the moon." Her lips trembled. "I ran because she ordered them to burn me before the first howl of labor." Phelan's expression darkened. He set down the knife. "Burning omegas while calling it purification," he murmured. "That's not faith. That's fear. You sound as if you've seen it before." "I've done worse," he answered, voice so low it startled her. Outside, the wind rose, rattling the old stones like bones in a grave. For a long time, neither spoke. Then, without looking at her, Phelan said, "You'll heal, in time. The child, too." Era wanted to believe him. But sanctuary was a fragile thing, easily shattered. That night, when she closed her eyes, dreams came. She saw the forest again, the broken moon, and a shadowed figure carrying fire toward the ruins. In her dream, the pendant around her neck glowed red, pulsing like a heartbeat not her own. When she awoke, Phelan was standing by the window, watching the horizon. "They found our trail," he said quietly. Her blood turned to ice. "Who?" "Your hunters," he replied. "And mine." He turned from the window, and his gaze met hers. Alpha to Omega, guilt to fear, prophecy to doom. "Stay behind me," he whispered. "If the moon wants blood, she'll have mine first." The wind screamed through the cracked walls. The forest outside stirred like an audience before a tragedy. Era pressed a hand to her belly, feeling the faint kick of life within, fragile, furious, alive. The goddess, perhaps, had not abandoned her after all. Dawn bled gray across the mountains, staining the snow with light too weak to warm. The ruins crouched against the slope like the bones of a forgotten keep, its stones veined with frost and memory. Smoke rose from Phelan's small fire, thin and reluctant, as though mourning what it had to consume. Era sat near the hearth, a wool blanket tight around her shoulders. Every muscle ached, every breath hurt. Her body was healing, but her spirit was not. For each day she lived, she remembered how close the pyres had come to claiming her. Phelan entered carrying a sack of foraged bark and herbs. His cloak was crusted white, his hair dusted with ice. Without a word, he knelt and placed the bundle near her. "For pain," he said, "and to keep the blood thick." She nodded, accepting dried roots ground into powder. The smell was sharp, earthy. She drank in silence, pretending not to notice the way he watched her drink, studying for signs of fever or fear. Outside, wolves cried, their voices echoing down the valley. The sound was ancient and mournful, a warning wrapped in song. Era glanced up. "They hunt?" He shook his head. "They warn. Something drives them off their grounds." "What kind of thing drives wolves?" Phelan's expression tightened. "Men." The single word carried more weight than the stones around them. She looked at him, truly looked then. The way exhaustion clung beneath his eyes, the faint shimmer of scars along his neck that pulsed faintly under moonlight. There was power there, yes, but also something hollowed. "Why hide here?" she asked softly. "I don't hide," he answered. "I wait." "For what?" "For a reason not to die." His voice was calm, as if observing the weather. Era found no pity in her chest. It wasn't sadness she felt, but recognition. She too had lived only because death had not yet found her. They passed that morning in tense peace. He repaired the roof with timbers scavenged from the forest's edge, while Era prepared herbs by the fire. The child within moved often now, and Phelan's attention softened whenever he saw her hand press against the swell of her belly. Around midday, she noticed a glint beneath his shirt as he worked, silver, blood-stained, carved in half. "The moon pendant," she murmured. He glanced back at her. "You still wear yours." "I was born marked," she said. "It was given the night of my first shift, when I swore loyalty to the pack I no longer have." Phelan lowered his gaze. "Mine was taken from a battlefield. It belonged to someone I failed to protect." "Then why do you keep it?" He wiped snow from his hands. "Because forgetting is easier than atoning." Era turned to the doorway. "Sometimes remembering is the only way to survive it." Their eyes met, two storms momentarily stilling in the same cold air. The peace did not last. By nightfall, the scent reached them. Steel, leather, human sweat. Phelan stiffened, every nerve alive. "They're near." "How many?" "4." He handed her his knife. "Keep your breathing quiet. Do not run." The hunters came fast through the snow. 3 men and 1 woman, marked with the sigil of the Northern Creed, torches casting fire across the ruined walls. Ira's chest seized at the words they shouted. Her name, her former rank, the promise of a bounty. Phelan stepped from the shadows before they reached the entrance. His sword gleamed like a mirror of the moon. "This place is forbidden," he said. They laughed. "So are kings who murder seers," one spat. "Step aside, exile. The girl's condemned." Phelan moved faster than breath. The first torch hit the snow still flaming, its bearer crumpled beside it. The second lunged and met his blade mid-turn. Era shielded her eyes when light burst from the steel, the markings on Phelan's arms flaring white as bone. When it was over, the ruins stank of blood and pine resin. The last surviving hunter crawled backward in terror, whispering, "Blood Throne speaks again." Then she fled into the night, leaving a trail of fire in her wake. Ira lowered the knife she had never used. "You killed them all." Phelan sheathed his sword. "No, one lives. Fear will spread the message faster than corpses." She stared at the bodies steaming in the snow. "You protect me for a debt or for redemption?" "Both," he said quietly, washing the blood from his hands. "But maybe they are the same thing." When the wind picked up again, the flames bent toward her, as if bowing. The moon above glowed twice as bright, casting silver into the keep. Era knelt by the hearth, tracing her palm over her stomach, where the child pressed in response to the storm outside. "Whoever this child becomes," she whispered, "let him remember mercy." Phelan paused at the doorway listening, though he pretended not to. For the first time in years, the word mercy did not burn his throat. Later, as the fire dwindled to embers, Ira wrapped her blanket tighter around her shoulders and watched him sleep upright against the wall. His blade rested across his knees, his breath slow and steady. She noticed how his hand twitched each time thunder moved distant across the peaks. A warrior who never stopped fighting, even in dreams. She leaned her head back and watched the snow fall through a gap in the roof. Somewhere far away, bells tolled, the call of a temple announcing the longest night. The goddess of the moon was watching again. Era closed her eyes and prayed not for deliverance, but for understanding, because perhaps, she thought, every curse had begun as a prayer once. Outside, unseen by either, a single wolf prowled along the ridge, its eyes reflecting human light. Twilight draped the mountains in violet haze, and the wind carried the slow groan of trees drenched in frost. The night before had left both guardians sleepless. Era sat near the dying fire, her hands trembling as she cleaned the knife Phelan had given her. Outside, the storm screamed across the peaks, desperate and mournful, like something alive. Phelan returned with the dawn. His cloak was torn, streaked in soot. He carried a pouch of bitter herbs and a limp rabbit strung by its feet. Blood had dried along the edge of his wrist, yet his expression remained quiet. "You went too far," she scolded faintly. "You shouldn't risk open ground." "They were scouting again," he said, setting the kill aside. "The same tracks as before, but newer." Her throat went dry. "My hunters?" "Yours," he confirmed. "And a few I know, old soldiers carrying my crest. They hunt their king now. Perhaps that is fitting." Phelan sank beside the fire and stretched his hands toward its weak warmth. The skin of his knuckles was split, scar tissue reopening. She reached forward and poured water over a strip of linen, pressing it gently around his wounds. He didn't flinch, though his jaw tightened. "Why do you heal me?" he asked finally. "After what I was?" "Because it's what I am," she said simply. "Even the moon heals her scars by shining brighter." He almost smiled, then stopped, perhaps afraid of what hope could awaken. Time in the keep slid strange and heavy. Some days the snow never ceased, turning the world to endless white. On others, the wind slept, leaving silence so thick that their breathing echoed through stone corridors like prayer. Era's belly had grown heavy, and Phelan's restlessness deepened alongside it. Each evening, he paced the outer walls, sword unsheathed, listening to a world he no longer trusted. One night, a strange scent reached them, smoke layered with resin and sweet oak. Not enemies, something older. She rose from her blanket, heart thudding. "It's temple fire," she whispered. "Moon fire." Phelan stiffened. "You're sure?" "I felt its heat in my bones." They stepped outside together, snow crunching beneath their boots. Across the horizon, a single flame flickered above the tree line, a torchlight glowing silver instead of gold. Then a second, then a third. "They've summoned a seer," Phelan said, voice low. "They'll try to cleanse what they can't control." "Which means me." He turned to her. "Or the child." Fear washed through her like ice water, then hardened into resolve. "We can't run, not this time." "No," he agreed. "We defend." She looked at him, seeing not the fallen king, but the man buried under guilt. "If this is the end, I want to know why you left your throne." Phelan's answer came slow. "Because the throne was built on sacrifice. My brother died to crown me, and my mate followed him to the grave. I fought to make peace and slaughtered those pleading for mercy. On the last field, I ordered hunters to torch a village that resisted tribute. I saw a woman fall screaming, clutching her stomach as smoke took her. Every night since, I've tried to forget her face." Era's breath caught. The fire's glow spilled across his face like confession. "You burned Moonreach," she said. "That woman was my sister." The silence that followed was not human. Even the wind withheld itself. He looked at her, waiting, ready to be killed. "You should hate me," he said finally. "I did," she answered. And then the goddess decided punishment wasn't enough. Phelan bowed his head. "Then she's cruel." "No," Era said, voice trembling. "She's patient." Lightning cracked through the clouds, splitting the mountains in half for an instant. The first torchlight descended the ridge. Faces flickered against the glare, cloaked figures bearing lunar sigils and silver brands of purification. Phelan pushed her gently back toward the entrance. "Inside." Era grasped his sleeve. "Don't kill them all, please." He hesitated. "If they come for you? Even then, promise me mercy." His lips quirked in a bitter shadow of a smile. "Mercy is the one thing I never learned." But he nodded, turning from her before she could answer. The hunters reached the gate. Voices chanted in ritual tones, summoning firelight shaped like serpents. Ira watched through the gap in the broken wall as Phelan met them head-on. The clash echoed through the valley, steel on steel, growls sharp as thunder. Between bursts of flame, she saw snow explode in red sprays. A scream rose, female, old, commanding. "Phelan Bloodthrone, by decree of the Lunar Council, your line ends tonight." "Then end it," he shouted back. "But the child lives!" He fought not as a warrior, but as someone at the edge of redemption, every strike measured, every blow sparing what could be spared. Era closed her eyes, whispering through cracked lips a hymn half remembered from her exile. "Light of the moon, hold your flame. Blood of the fallen, find your name." When she opened her eyes again, the ridge was empty except for the flicker of 2 dying torches and Phelan's bent frame in the snow. He staggered toward her, blood streaking the curve of his jaw, his breath a cloud of exhaustion. "They'll return," he said, voice hoarse. "Not alone next time." Era reached for him but paused when her chest seized in sudden pain. Heat flared down her spine, the unmistakable beginning of birth. Phelan caught her as she doubled over. "It's too soon." "It's now," she gasped. He lifted her, carried her inside, and laid her on a fur-lined cot near the fire. The storm outside roared like 1,000 wings unfurling. Between lightning and shadow, the silver pendant at her neck began to glow again, unbroken, as though answering a call. The moon hung enormous in the window, its light falling upon Phelan's torn hands as they pressed over her trembling stomach. "What are you?" he whispered, not to her, but to the destiny that bound them. Her eyes met his through the agony. "The beginning," she said through tears, "or the end." Outside, the wolves began to howl, not in hunger this time, but in prayer. The child came into the world between thunderclaps. Phelan had barely time to clear the furs before Era's scream tore through the keep. Snow shuddered from the rafters. Outside, lightning burned a forest ridge into momentary daylight. Then darkness returned, pressing close. He worked by firelight, hands shaking yet precise, remembering the few fragments of battlefield healing he still knew. How to staunch a wound, how to command breath. Era's fingers dug into his sleeve. Her cry carved itself into his chest. "Breathe," he whispered. "I have you." When the air finally stilled, a thin wail rose, a sound both fragile and infinite. A boy, slick with blood and moonlight, his tiny chest rising with impossible will. "He lives," Phelan murmured. Relief collapsed his body. Ira reached weakly for the child, and he placed the bundle against her heart. For several breaths, they said nothing. Snowfall slowed outside, softer now, as though the world had been holding its lungs. The baby quieted almost instantly, nested beneath the torn blanket, eyes opening to reveal a color Phelan had never seen, silver threaded with amber. "He carries two lights," Era whispered, "the moon and the fire." Phelan looked away, afraid of what that meant. By morning the sky cleared to pale gold. He buried the slain pursuers beneath a cairn behind the keep, marking no names. When he returned, the hearth had gone cold, and Ira was trying to stand, stubborn even in weakness. "We must leave," she said. "If they return with a seer, they'll scent him. You cannot walk. I can crawl if I have to." Phelan stared at her, this thin woman whose bones still trembled from blood loss, yet whose voice refused surrender. He thought of all the alphas he had led, of their pride and ceremony, their claims of strength. None had ever sounded stronger than her. He lifted her before she could argue, wrapping both mother and child in his cloak. Watching her cradle the newborn pierced him deeper than any blade. He saw his own crimes in miniature, the villages burned, the children never born, the promise of mercy undone. They stayed hidden another day, waiting for the moon to wane. Each hour pulled memories from him, the faces of the men he'd commanded, of the brother hammered to death in battle, of his mate Illyra smiling once before fire consumed her. For the first time, he spoke of her aloud. "She was expecting," he said quietly, sitting opposite Era. "You asked once why I left the throne. She died before the coronation. The child, too." Era lifted her gaze from the newborn. The light from the small window touched her cheek like a benediction. "And you thought killing could balance it?" "I thought nothing could," he admitted. "So I chose the only weight heavy enough to bear the silence. War." Her stare did not flinch. "Then the goddess gave you another chance to protect what you destroyed." He almost laughed, a sound cracked by grief. "You think this child will forgive a kingslayer?" "He has no reason to. Forgiveness is for those still living," she said. "But he will learn mercy if he knows your story." Night fell again. They rested in turn, the boy between them like a fragile truce. Phelan dozed by the embers, and the dream came unbidden. He stood once more on the smoking fields of the Blood Vale, corpses glittering with frost, the moon bleeding red overhead. And there, among them, the woman he thought long gone. Illyra turned, whispering through the flame, "You can heal nothing by dying, Phelan." He woke with a start. Ira sat awake, humming softly, voice raw yet soothing. "What was that song?" he asked. "An old prayer to the Mother Moon," she said. "It's sung to those born under storms. She listens when blood and rain fall together." He rested his elbows on his knees. "Does she listen to murderers?" "She listens to every heartbeat that hasn't stopped." The fire cracked. A spark leapt to his wrist, searing a small mark over old scars. He left it, refusing to wipe it away. At midday, distant horns rolled across the valley. Phelan's head lifted, every muscle taut. "They've crossed the ridge," he muttered. "Too many this time." Era tightened her hold on the child. "Then we run." "No." He stood. "If we flee again, she'll scent weakness. The council doesn't forgive defiance. They erase it. I'll draw them away." "You'll die." He looked down at her, the ghost of a smile softening a face carved by regret. "Perhaps that's the point." "No," she said fiercely. "You don't owe death anymore." His hand brushed the infant's brow, a fiery tenderness in his eyes. "I owe him life." When he reached the gate, she ran after him despite the pain. "Phelan!" He turned. The wind tangled their hair in silver strands, snow burning cold between them. "If you fall," she said, breathless, "I'll follow. Not because I forgive you, but because I won't let your story end as another ghost's." For a heartbeat, he only looked at her. Then he unclasped the broken moon pendant from his neck and pressed it into her palm. The metal was warm. "Keep it near his heart. It will know when to burn again." He kissed the child's forehead once, then vanished into the storm. As his shadow faded, Ira whispered to the baby, "Your father of blood seeks redemption in snow. Your father of spirit defies the moon. One day, little one, you'll choose which truth to follow." The wind answered with a distant cry, neither storm nor beast, but something older rising from the mountains. Era tightened her hold and stared into the ashes of the extinguished fire. The coals flared suddenly, blooming back to life without touch, their glow reflecting off her pendant until it matched the rhythm of two hearts instead of one. Outside, Phelan moved through darkness, Bladeship reborn in silence. Each step he took left a faint trail of light beneath the snow, proof that guilt alone was now his guide. Somewhere deep in the forest, the goddess watched from her hidden moon and exhaled. The story was changing shape. The wound of one world was beginning to mend. The moon rose swollen and red, its light brushing the snow like spilled wine. Era stood at the ruined gate long after Phelan disappeared into the tree line. She could still hear the clash of distant steel carried on the wind, faint as memory. Each cry that broke the silence tightened her chest. The child in her arms stirred, murmuring soft, half-dreamed sounds. "Shh," she whispered. "He'll return." But even as she said it, doubt slid cold along her spine. Inside the keep, the fire would not stay lit. Each time she fed it, the flame dimmed, as if refusing to burn without him. She pressed the pendant against her heart. Its metal throbbed with heat, pulsing in rhythm with some unseen beat far away. Outside, the wolves had gathered. Their eyes glowed at the edges of the forest, silent sentinels watching the widow and her newborn. None advanced, yet none turned away. They waited for command that might never come again. Hours passed. Then, suddenly, the silence broke. The ground trembled with approaching riders. Ira moved quickly, wrapping the baby in her shawl and tucking him into the hollow beneath the altar stones. She whispered an old protective charm, the one her mother had taught her when storms came. The stone closed tight around the infant, leaving only the whisper of breath to mark he was there. The first blow struck the gate like thunder. Era spun, clutching Phelan's sword with both hands. The barrier splintered inward, and 4 riders burst through, their armor marked with the lunar sigil of judgment, a full-circle moon carved by flame. Their leader dismounted, his voice echoing against the stone. Era of Moonreach, by decree of the High Seer, you are to yield the cursed child born of forbidden lineage. She raised the sword, its weight foreign yet righteous. He is no curse. He is proof that prophecy bleeds true, the man said. An alpha reborn in Omega womb, blasphemy given breath. Era's wrists shook, but her gaze did not falter. Blasphemy is killing what the moon herself allowed to live. The warrior sneered and stepped forward, but before his foot touched earth, a howl tore through the valley. Not the wild kind, a command. Every wolf around the keep answered. From between the trees, shadow moved. Phelan returned like the echo of a storm reborn, his armor half shattered, his sword dripping silver blood, not his own. He did not speak. He struck. The first rider fell before drawing breath. The second tried to block and met steel through lung. The leader lunged at his blind side, blade sinking deep into Phelan's shoulder. He grunted but did not fall. Blood smoked against snow. Era watched, frozen between prayer and terror, as Phelan turned rage into grace. Every movement a confession, every wound a vow renewed. The wolves advanced with him, silent arcs of white fury. When the last enemy hit the ground, Phelan dropped to one knee and pressed his palm into the snow. Steam rose. The wound in his shoulder hissed against cold air. Ira ran to him, kneeling in the ash-colored light. "You can't keep doing this," she said. "The guilt doesn't have to live forever." "This isn't for guilt," he rasped. "It's for promise." Lightning flared overhead, a blinding sheet of white that split sky from mountain. The pendant at his chest ignited, heat radiating through both of them. The mark along Era's wrists, the one burned there during her exile, flared too, a twin pattern. She gasped. The glow linked them like a chain of fire. "What is this?" she whispered. "The moon binding," Phelan said. "My line's last rite. It connects life and blood. It means whatever happens to me touches you, and you'll know when I fall." "I won't let you fall," he managed half a smile. "Then hold fast, Omega of Mercy. There's still one left." From the forest edge came a single figure cloaked in white, her face veiled, her staff tipped with a crescent of fire. The High Seer herself, gliding toward the ruin as though walking across light. "Phelan Bloodthrone," she called, "return what was stolen from fate." He rose unsteady, snow still bleeding red beneath him. "I stole nothing. I refused to let her die." "You defied divine order," the seer replied, her voice filled with dreadful calm. "And for that, the moon demands absolution." Ira stepped in front of him, spine straight, eyes fierce. "If the moon demands blood, she can take mine." The seer extended her hand, and the air cracked. Power flung Ira backward against the wall. Stones cascaded around her, dust filling her lungs. She barely saw Phelan move, only light colliding against light. When she crawled upright, the seer's staff was shattered, her veil torn. Phelan stood above her, sword raised. But he hesitated. The seer looked up, eyes ancient and terrible. "Mercy?" she whispered. "Even now?" Something broke inside him. He let the sword fall away. "Yes," he said. "Because if I kill you, I prove you right." The seer closed her eyes, exhaling faintly, and when she opened them again, the fire was gone. She turned slowly and walked into the snow without another word. Phelan fell to his knees. The glow from his pendant dimmed to ash. Ira crawled to him, pressing her hands over the wound in his shoulder. "You'll live," she said, voice shaking. He smiled through blood. "No, but he will." Era leaned forward, touching her forehead to his. The air thickened with warmth, though snow whirled around them. He reached up once more, tracing the outline of her cheek. Tell him the world was beautiful, even broken. His breath left him. The storm stilled. All the wolves lowered their heads as one. Ira screamed once, a raw, endless sound, and then silence consumed the valley. The moon turned white again, merciful and distant, as if washing clean what it had witnessed. She stayed kneeling until dawn, her body a statue carved of grief and frost. Beneath her fingers, Phelan's heart had stopped, yet the pendant still beat faintly, warm against the snow, carrying his vow onward. She lifted it and pressed it to her own chest. Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. Dawn crawled over the valley like a wounded animal. The storm had ended, but the silence that followed was heavier than thunder. Ira sat beside Phelan's still body, her fingers tracing the dried blood along his throat. Frost had formed there, crystalline and cruel, yet his expression remained strangely peaceful, lips curved as if still whispering to the moon. The child stirred beneath the altar stones. She stood slowly, her legs numb with grief, and lifted him into her arms. "He's gone," she whispered to the boy, "but his vow lives here." She pressed the infant against her chest, where the pendant's warmth pulsed faintly through cloth and skin. When daylight filled the keep, Ira built a pyre from fallen beams and wolf bone, arranging each piece with reverence. She cleaned the blood from his brow, braided his hair once more, and set his sword across his chest. The surviving wolves circled in silence. When she struck flint to fire, the pyre lifted into gold flame. Smoke coiled upward like a column of prayer. "Go, Phelan of Bloodthrone," she said through trembling lips. "Go where guilt cannot reach you." The fire answered with a low hiss, consuming armor and flesh until only ashes and the faint shimmer of steel remained. Then, quietly, the pendant at her heart brightened, curling threads of silver light through the rising smoke until it joined the wind like the sigh of a departing soul. Ira did not weep again. She gathered the child, wrapped him in fur, and rode a stolen horse east through the thawing forest. She didn't look back. For 3 days, she traveled beyond the reach of mountains, across frozen rivers and empty plains. Villages whispered when she passed. Her name had become legend already, the White Omega, mother of the moon-born heir. Some prayed to her, some cursed her shadow. She ignored them all. The world no longer felt like hers. She lived only for the heartbeat beneath her hand. By the 4th day, the boy fell ill. Fever burned under his pale skin. Ira camped beside a ruined shrine and prayed, not to the council, not even to the goddess, but to the man she had burned. "If any part of you remains," she murmured, "guide me now." The wind shifted. Out of the northern dark rolled a murmur, half word, half breath, and the pendant blazed against her chest. She pressed the glowing metal over the child's heart. The fever broke an instant later. She held him until sunrise, the light returning to his lips. "You are Silren," she whispered, "son of mercy and storm. You will not inherit his crown, but his truth." Years turned. The boy grew amid forests and ruins, learning the songs of the wolves that followed their campfires. Ira never returned to the highlands. She lived between kingdoms, healer to strangers, ghost to those who remembered the wars. When Silren reached his 7th winter, he found the remnants of Phelan's sword buried beneath snow and silence. The blade was cracked but hummed faintly when touched. "Is this his?" he asked. "Yes," Ira answered. "The weapon of a king who learned when to stop killing. Can a blade forget blood?" She smiled sadly. "Only if someone teaches it." That night, she dreamed of Phelan again, not as a corpse, but as light walking the edge of the moon. "The blood throne is not gone," he told her. "It waits for the one who rules by mercy, not fear." She woke before dawn, heart pounding. Outside, a line of wolves watched her from the ridge. Their eyes glimmered silver. When she blinked, they were gone, leaving paw prints filled not with snow, but with faint light. 3 days later, strangers appeared. 2 men in black cloaks bearing sigils unfamiliar to her. They knelt before the fire. "We are remnants of the old guard," one said. "The throne you fled from stands empty. The council is divided. Your child's birth was prophecy. They believe the blood throne must rise again." Ira's pulse thundered. "You will not take him." "We don't need to," the second whispered. "He already calls to the wolves." At that moment, Silren stepped into the clearing. The wolves that had been hiding in the shadows approached him, tails low, eyes wide with recognition. The boy reached out, touching the nearest muzzle without fear. The beast bowed. Ira felt the ground shift beneath her feet. That night, when Silren slept, she sat beside his furs and stared at the pendant gleaming beside his heart. "You see him, don't you?" she murmured to whatever spirit still listened. "You see what he carries?" As if in answer, the wind through the trees unfolded into words. "He will bring peace, but only through loss. Prepare him for the cost." From the east came thunder, not the storm's kind, but the echo of drums, armies moving through snow. The council had not forgotten. They marched for the child who could overturn their laws. Era tightened her cloak, realization sinking that the journey she had hoped to end was beginning instead. Before dawn, she woke Silren. "We travel west," she said, "to your father's ashes. There's something the moon still wants us to find." He blinked sleep from his eyes. "Will he be there?" She paused. "In ways you'll understand when we arrive." They rode beneath a bruised sky, wolves following like shadows resurrected. As the mountain peaks appeared on the horizon, the pendant glowed again, and far off. For an instant only, Era thought she saw a silhouette standing in the snow, tall, armed in broken light, watching over them. She did not stop. Some promises she knew are kept beyond death. The western road wound through forests older than kings, where roots tangled like veins beneath the frost. Era rode ahead, cloak drawn close, the pendant's glow faint beneath her throat. Behind her, Silren guided the horse with a steadiness that no child should possess. He was barely 12, yet moved like someone listening to more than wind. Winter's breath clung even when the sun rose, wrapping the world in pale silence. Each step echoed with memory. At times, Ira saw flickers of Phelan among the trees, a shimmer of metal, a shadow passing behind light, never fully there, never fully gone. They reached the valley where the old keep once stood. Wild grass had grown over the ruins, snowmelt carving silver streams through stone foundations. The air smelled of iron and pine sap. "This is where he died," Era said quietly, "where mercy defeated rage." Silren knelt by the blackened earth, his hand hovering above the soil as if feeling its pulse. "He's still here." "How do you know?" "Because the ground hums like his voice." He pressed the pendant against the dirt. Light spilled outward in soft ripples. The ashes hidden beneath responded in blue fire, forming patterns that coiled and faded as mist. A circle appeared, then a sigil Era remembered from the royal banners of Bloodthrone. The boy's eyes gleamed. "He waits for me to finish what he began." Era set a hand on his shoulder. "To rule?" "To reconcile," he said simply. For nights they camped within the ruins, rebuilding what wind had taken. Wolves hunted nearby but never crossed the boundary of the stone circle. Each evening Silren practiced with his father's cracked sword, every motion guided by instinct more than memory. Era watched in silence, torn between pride and dread. On the fourth night, drums echoed again from the east. Scouts of the Lunar Council had found their trace. Flames flared along the horizon. Ira gripped his arm. "We must go." He shook his head. "If we flee now, they'll chase forever. The moon chooses its tests. We face this one." "Silren." "Mother," he said, half child, half seer. "You told me mercy doesn't mean surrender." The words silenced her. They prepared through the long night, reinforcing broken walls, lighting trenches with pitch. When dawn broke pale, riders appeared, dozens clad in silver armor. At their front rode the new High Seer, younger than the last, eyes cold as frostbite. "Hand over the boy," she called, "and the goddess may forgive your defiance." Era stood at the gate, hair streaming in wind. Forgiveness cannot be bargained. "You stand against divine order." Silren stepped forward before she could hold him back. "No," he said, voice clear, too calm for his years. "I stand within it. You are the ones who forgot what the moon promised. Compassion before judgment." The seer raised her staff, but the light from the pendant pierced its flame. For an instant the world turned white. Wolves poured from the forest edges, not as beasts, but as messengers, each carrying a spark of Phelan's old aura, each howling in harmony. The ensuing battle felt like the world unmaking itself. Steel fell against fang, prayer against prophecy. Era fought beside her son, her body remembering strength buried under years. At the battle's center, Silren lifted his sword, and where it struck, no blood spilled. The metal burned with light that erased the very scent of death. The seer shrieked, casting her spell toward him, but the energy dissolved against an unseen barrier. Behind the shimmer stood Phelan, no longer flesh, no longer dead, but spirit bound to the vow he had sworn. His eyes held dawn. "End it, Silren," Phelan's voice carried like thunder over snow. "Not with vengeance, with remembrance." The boy lowered his blade. The wolves stopped. The wind ceased. Every soldier fell still, eyes wide as stars. Silren pressed the pendant to the ground. Light expanded again, engulfing the ruins in warmth and silence. The snow melted, revealing the old crest carved in stone, a shattered moon whole again. When it faded, the riders were gone. Only the child, his mother, and the lingering figure of Phelan remained. Era knelt, tears cutting clean paths down her cheeks. "So it's finished?" Phelan shook his head. "Stories never end, Era. They change keepers." He turned to their son. "You are the pathfinder now. Lead them where power kneels to mercy." Silren reached for him, but his father's form dissolved into light, scattering like ash upon dawn's first gust. The valley exhaled, no longer cursed, no longer hollow. Where the pyre had once burned, a single blossom pushed through frost, a flower of silver petals streaked with red veins, cold yet alive. Era touched it and whispered, "Moon's blood." The boy nodded solemnly. "We'll plant it on every battlefield until none remain." They stayed until evening. Wolves settled around them, guardians restating an oath older than fear. Before sleeping, Silren asked quietly, "Was he proud of us?" Era smiled at the stars. "He was a king who learned to kneel. Of course he was." When dawn rose, they began walking south, following the river that mirrored the sky. Behind them, the ruins shimmered once in farewell. Stone turning briefly to silver under first light, then faded back to forest. At the horizon, the moon lingered even against morning, refusing to vanish completely, as if promising to watch what came next. Spring came hesitantly to the north, melting the edges of winter without fully claiming them. Snowmelt dripped from black branches, and the river carried fragments of ice that caught sunlight like broken glass. Era walked along its bank, her son beside her, no longer a child, not yet a man, his hair pale as mist. For a time, there was peace. Villages once divided by blood began to trade again. The wolves vanished into the high forests, leaving silence where howls had marked each dusk. People spoke of an unseen blessing that had crossed the mountains, crops growing where frost had lived, water clear of war's ash. Silren spent his days helping the scattered packs rebuild. His gift was strange, not strength, but the calm that stilled anger. When rivals met him, their tempers faltered. When children cried, his voice eased them. The moon, it seemed, had shaped him from compassion itself. Era watched with quiet fear. "The world cannot bear too much light," she warned him once. "Then I'll dim it when needed," he answered, half smiling. They built a small lodge on the site where Phelan had died, stone replaced by wood, sorrow replaced by song. Each night, mother and son lit a single candle in his memory. The tradition spread, others came, bringing offerings and stories, until the hill became a shrine known as the House of Mercy. But peace rarely endures forever. By midsummer, heralds arrived from the southern realms, a new war rising, old kings fearing the unity of wolves and outcasts. Envoys demanded that Silren, the healer boy, pledge loyalty to their crown or face extinction. Era refused them at the door. "We bow only to the moon," she said. One envoy spit at the threshold. "The moon cannot rule men." "She already does," Silren murmured behind her. That night he stood outside beneath a bleeding sunset and spoke softly to the pendant. "Father, what do we do when mercy is mistaken for weakness?" The wind answered through the trees, carrying the faint jingle of old armor. "You remind them mercy has teeth." The next dawn came red. Armies moved through the plains, their banners cutting color into cloud. Era gathered a handful of trusted kin. Silren summoned the scattered wolves. They met the invading force at the border where ice met soil, the same ridge where Phelan once fell. As soldiers advanced, Silren rode to the front unarmed. "We seek no throne," he called, "only the right to live as the moon created us." The commander laughed. "Then die as beasts." Arrows darkened the sky. But before they could fall, light burst across the field, pure, blinding, and silent. Every arrow turned to ash midair. The armies froze. At the hilltop, Phelan's spirit appeared again, monumental and radiant, his outline forged from the same silver flame that had once sealed his vow. Era fell to her knees. The wolves howled until the valley trembled. "Lay down your blades," Phelan's voice thundered, echoing through bone and stone. The blood throne was forged to end suffering, not to crown tyrants. Soldiers staggered backward. Some fled. Others dropped their weapons in awe. Within the radiance, Silren stepped forward. The pendant broke from his mother's neck and floated between them, spinning slowly. "Father," he whispered. "Finish it," the spirit said. "The circle must close." Silren reached into the light. When his fingers touched the pendant, it flared into living fire that poured through him, memories of every death, every mercy, every promise Phelan had ever made. He felt both agony and understanding. Era called out, "Stop! You'll burn!" But the boy stood unscorched. "No, Mother. I'm becoming—" The glow expanded until every shadow vanished. When the brilliance faded, the battlefield was empty of armies. Grass bent beneath a sudden warm wind. In the center stood Silren, transformed. The faint sigil of a moon burned at his throat, whole again. Era approached him slowly, tears slipping into the lines time had given her. "You carry him. I carry us all," he said softly. Phelan's voice lingered once more, softer now. "Mercy is not surrender, my son. It's the courage to face tomorrow unarmed." Then he was gone, his essence scattering into the rising daylight like dust returning to stars. For hours, mother and son stood beneath a sky cleared of clouds. The scent of rain came gentle, sweet, leaving the air spotless. They buried the pendant beside the single silver flower that still bloomed in frost. Around it, wild grass bent toward the setting sun. Era touched the soil. "The prophecy ends." Silren helped her to her feet. "No," he said, smiling through grief. "It begins again. The blood throne is mercy itself, and mercy never dies." Years later, travelers crossing the valley would swear they heard voices in the night. A woman's gentle hum, a boy's laughter, and wolves guarding unseen paths. They called the place the Valley of Redemption. Those who entered angry left calm. Those who entered fearful left changed. Under new moons, when wind swept from the north, flames flickered briefly atop the old shrine, pale silver, dancing like ghosts that knew no sorrow. And in that silence, the world learned again the truth the goddess had written in every heartbeat. Every Alpha King carries a wound. Every Omega was born to heal one. If your heart beat alongside ours, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.